with the panel. We are very, very lucky to have John Battles to help lead our science advisory committee of our task force. Professor Battles is an expert in forest ecology and is at UC Berkeley, and he's just been instrumental in all the work we've done over the last few years. So over to you, John.
Thank you, Secretary Crowfoot. I'm super excited to be here today to talk about our progress in tracking what's going on in our landscapes. One of the tenets of resource management is that you can't manage what you don't measure. And the task force leadership has taken this principle to heart and prioritized assembling and aligning all the information we have. But it's a big job. The mission of the task force encompasses a large subset of California's vast natural resources that we have to assess. And we also have to track progress toward protecting our communities, our firefighters, and our vital infrastructure. So our approach is to break this down and look at it piece by piece. And today you'll hear some of the steps that we're taking to make that progress. Now, this big job has lots of aspects to it. We have to break it down, and we always stop and said, what are we measuring and why? We're measuring what for what. And there's a lot of different functions that we want to be able to do. And so we break them down, and now while we can share information and we can share some of the resources, each function has its own need. So we think of it this way. We have planning. That is really important. We want to provide all of the information we have to the planners so each region, each local resource can see what they want and try and see what's going on and make things that work for them. And so we've assembled these metrics in the regional resource kit, and there's hundreds of them for each region of the state. You can kind of pick and choose. The next step is, what does it mean? When we put these treatments on the ground, what are the initial outcomes? We want quick, sort of consistent snapshots. We want to get beyond acres treated, and are we moving the condition in the direction we want? So that's called what we call our outcome reporting. Importantly, we also want to measure our effectiveness. Are these treatments actually reducing wildfire hazard? Are these treatments actually protecting our communities? And we need to do that on two scales. We do it at the project scale, and today we'll hear from Chief Bigelow on their progress in seeing what happens to fuel treatment effects in terms of wildfire fighting, and then also at the landscape scale. And Natural Resource Agency is taking the lead here in building out the system, the Wildfire Ecosystem Resilient and Climate Assessment. This is a project that's coming out soon, and they'll have a whole system to do this landscape and statewide. Lastly, we do status and trends monitoring. These are authoritative, robust analyses trying to understand both the direction, magnitude, and drivers of change in our resources. And in California, we have two really big efforts in that way. At CAL FIRE, we have the Fire and Resource Assessments Program. Every 5 years, they do an authoritative and really careful analysis on the conditions of our forest and range across the state. And very soon, their most recent edition is coming out. These are valuable resources that take a really compendium look at the state. And then, of course, the U.S. Forest Service, they have a charge to go and monitor what's going on in their landscapes, and they've really upped their game recently with this broad-scale monitoring program. They've taken all the information they've been collecting and putting it in this really effective dashboard that both has the data and valuable summaries. So today we're going to give you just a snapshot of what we're doing. We have three different projects and 4 esteemed panelists. We'll kind of walk through this step by step. And we'll start with what arguably is one of the most important, is where the treatment's going on. Now, if you want to know what we're doing and you want to get progress and see what's going on in terms of measuring and tracking and monitoring, we have a new sort of tab on our website. You can get it here and you can get up to date on what's going on. So for our first panelists, we're going to have 2 scientists from CAL FIRE. We have Dr. Alan Telhelm. He is the Assistant Deputy Director of Climate and Energy at CAL FIRE. And among his many responsibilities, Dr. Telhelm has been the lead on developing the treatment tracker from the very inception. We also have Dr. Emily Brody, who's a forest monitoring scientist at CAL FIRE, and her priority chore these last 4 weeks is putting all of these pieces together into this puzzle to see what's going on. So I'll introduce, I think, Alan, you're starting, and we'll let you go.
Thanks for passing the puck over to me, John. Let's see if we can get as many ice and hockey jokes in as we can here at the task force meeting today. So I'm here to talk to you about the Interagency Treatment Tracking Dashboard. It was just over a year ago that we released the beta version of the Interagency Treatment Tracking Dashboard. I remember it pretty vividly and hazily because it was about a week after my younger son was born that I was presenting that beta version. Today we have an update, some changes, some new data we have for you. I want to start by just talking about some of the goals that we have for treatment tracking. One is to support transparency. You know, there's a lot of money going out on the ground for all this work, billions of dollars from state government and the federal government to try to make all this stuff happen. We need to be able to show our work, show where all that stuff is happening, provide some accountability for that. A second goal is to get the data on the ground. What do I mean by that? We need to get these data into the hands of people planning treatments, the RCDs, the fire safe councils, the local CAL FIRE units, Forest Service ranger districts, so they can see the work that their partners are doing and plan and put treatments on the ground in the most effective places possible. We also need to get the data in the hands of incident managers who are out doing firefighting operations so that they can work as effectively as possible. We need to provide data that we can use to assess the benefits and costs so we can really move beyond the acres treated. We also obviously need to track progress toward our state and federal acreage targets. So these are the goals, the needs that we had in developing this treatment tracking system that really shaped the way that we've designed and implemented the system. So in order to meet all these goals, we really are trying to assemble federal data, state data, local and private data, really to the extent that we can, putting all this stuff together to tell a story. So here's the dashboard landing page. We're calling this update version 1.0. The updates are that we now have 3 years of data. When we were up on this stage a year ago, releasing the beta version, we just had data for 2022. We now have data through 2021, 2022, and 2023, so 3 years of work. It shows work that has been done from both active and completed treatments, and we have state, federal, and timber industry data. I want to acknowledge very much the help that we've had in developing this treatment tracker. The beta version was released with the help of the Climate and Wildfire Institute and the Spatial Informatics Group. And then this version 1.0 has been supported really greatly by the San Diego Supercomputing Center, and definitely not possible without the work of all 3 of those organizations. So here is the draft dashboard. I think maybe if I put forward on this, it'll play. Yeah, so we've got a little demonstration here. The big new change this year is you can toggle years and look at the different years up on the dashboard, and it'll change from one year to the other. Of course, you can always zoom in and look at where these treatments are. It starts at points. If you zoom in far enough, it turns into the polygon, so you can actually see the locations where they are on the ground and what types of treatments they are. If you click on a treatment, it'll bring up the attributes for that treatment. You can change, if you change the year, it'll show the different polygons in that particular area, color-coded by treatment type. You can see what organizations are doing the work, where and when they did the work, breaks it down by ownership, and the type of work that's happening on the ground. So it's a really great tool if you're looking to see where these treatments are happening out on the landscape. And you could use this tool right here to go out and after the meeting or tomorrow see where those treatments are in the South Lake Tahoe area. So that little demonstration I was just showing you was focused on what we're calling activity acres. We also have another metric on the dashboard that's called footprint acres. And I want to be able to help you understand what those 2 terms mean. So here's a little diagram that helps us do that. And so in order to complete a treatment or sort of help restore a forest or another ecosystem, you may need to visit that piece of land multiple times within a year or 2 years or 3 years. And we want to be able to account for both the level of effort that it takes to do that work and also the geography. So what we call activity acres, the data that I was just showing you, is the level of effort. So in order to complete treatment, maybe you need to do a thinning treatment. Maybe then you would come back and pile the residues from that thinning treatment. You would then maybe burn those residues, burn those piles 6 months, a year later, and then maybe you come back and do a broadcast burn. So you've gone to that 1 acre 4 times. That's 4 activity acres. At the same time, we also need to account very clearly for the geography that we're touching, so that we have a good understanding of how much of the land we're actually touching. So that would just be one footprint acre. And this dashboard that we have shows both metrics. Here are the totals for 2023. I don't know that you got a good look at them. We're just flashing up that demo. We had for 2023 over 1 million activity acres. This is a tremendous accomplishment. It's a team effort. I definitely want to acknowledge that. The Forest Service had more than 250,000 acres in 2023. If we were to, I want to also point out that these data sets we have here are not necessarily real time. This is a Forest Service data pool from I think back in June. So the Forest Service numbers are probably higher right now if we were to go back to 2023. And also represents that this is a living data set and it will continue to be updated. We had a lot of partners here: the Forest Service, industry, CAL FIRE, Caltrans, the Fish and Wildlife departments from both the state and the federal government, as well as a long list of other entities. Footprint number is quite a bit lower, as you would expect, because you may need to hit those acres more than once. Our footprint number is about 700,000 acres for 2023. And with that, I'm going to pass it off to my colleague, Emily.
Thanks, Alan. Hi, everyone. So there are some known data updates and new data sources that we weren't able to integrate by today into version 1.0. And these include data for 10 plus state conservancies, including Tahoe Conservancy, Sierra Nevada Conservancy, Santa Monica Mountains Conservancy, and others. These also include new data sources, so data from electrical utilities and fuel break data created and maintained by timber companies. Together, these total about 51,000 acres, and they'll be incorporated into the dashboard version 1.1. We would have loved to have had these data integrated by today, but I think it's actually has a silver lining in that it reminds us that the interagency tracking system and the associated dashboard is a work in progress, and it will continue to be a work in progress due to the dynamic nature of these underlying data sets. These data sets have their own deadlines and their own update cycles. So we anticipate that with each version update, we'll have current and future years more complete. Here you see activity acres across time for federal and non-federal entities. You can see that federal acres since 2021 are up by about 150,000 and non-federal acres up by about 75,000. We wanted to highlight that this jump in federal acres is really driven by an increase in prescribed fire, and that there's been a real increase in prescribed fire for non-federal entities as well. Now it's worth noting, this is something that Kara talked about earlier, that our prescribed fire category for the task force includes, for the Forest Service only, treatment areas where prescribed fire was planned, where a NEPA decision was signed, but where those acres weren't completed, or the objective wasn't completed by somebody with a drip torch, but in fact by an unplanned lightning ignition. So for Forest Service acres, those are included in prescribed fire. Here we see our footprint acres now across time, and this is split up again by federal and non-federal land ownerships. You can see that since 2021, footprint acres are up by about 150,000. And I think one really important thing to note here is that in 2020, when the Forest Service and the state of California signed the MOU to treat 1 million acres a year by 2025, so the million acre strategy, all we were counting and tracking were activity acres. But since that time, there's been a real effort to distinguish between acres of activity done on the ground and how many geographical acres those activities took place on. And so it's been determined that the latter, our footprint acres, are most in line with the million-acre strategy. So we use footprint acres to track our progress towards the million-acre strategy. Here at almost 700,000 acres this year, we're not quite at a million, but we're making really good progress in that direction. We also want to acknowledge that utility work along power lines and other infrastructure is an important part of wildfire safety. On this slide, you'll see some annual statistics from PG&E, which you can see they do about 100,000 miles of work annually on transmission and distribution lines. And work by PG&E and other utilities includes vegetation management, like tree trimming and removal, pole brushing, radial clearance, and this vegetation management work fits really cleanly into the tracking system as it exists now. But there's also work by utilities, including Defensible Space Program, grants to fire safe councils, and a lot of inspection, inventory, and patrol that we can't currently or don't currently incorporate into our dashboard. So with the action plan update, we'd like to work to document these types of actions and also to potentially include some additional metrics like miles. For this year, though, we had to take those points and lines from the utility data sets and turn them into acres to put them into the dashboard. So we did this in a conservative way. We buffered the points related to tree work by the crown radius of the tree, which we calculated using the tree stem diameter. We buffered the points related to pole work by 10 feet, which is a number from the Public Resources Code. And we buffered out lines using the recommended minimum clearances from the California Public Utilities Commission. So with that, I'll change back to Alan to finish things up.
Great, so I want to point you to this QR code and also the task force website, wildfiretaskforce.org. You can follow links on wildfiretaskforce.org to get to the treatment tracking dashboard. On that dashboard landing page, we have some supporting documentation. You can download the data if you want and do your own GIS analysis or look at a spreadsheet version to really dig in and understand what's happening across the state. We have FAQs to help you understand how this data set might be different from some other data sets that are out there, from CAL FIRE or the Forest Service or other products. I also want to talk about some next steps. So obviously we need to complete the data integration, add in those data sets that Emily mentioned from the different state conservancies, from the utilities, from timber industry, and we hope to have that done later this year. Next is we need to expand the database. There are some more historical data out there. Data sets like the Forest Service Facts database goes back a number of years. We'd like to include more of that historical information within the dashboard. We'd also like to be able to include more information on planned treatments, so that can really facilitate the work of local organizations and people getting the work on the ground to see where other organizations around them have planned treatments upcoming. We also want to expand the database and look for ways to include more data from local governments, from tribes, from NGO community as well. So we know there's a lot of work that they're doing that we may not be capturing from our state, federal, and industry data sources that we have. We also want to, in the longer term, do regular annual updates showing our progress similar to what we're doing today and like we did about a year ago at this time. We want to automate this data system more. A number of the data sets that we're pulling from, such as the Forest Service or the Park Service or CAL FIRE, these are existing online data resources, and our processing of that can be automated into the future. So I think this is a great step. We've made a lot of great progress, but as Emily said, this is going to be a living, dynamic tool. Hopefully it will be a great resource to all of you going forward and into the future. John?
You're dancing. All right. Thanks, Alan and Emily. That's great. So our workflow here starts with the planning. So we have all these metrics that go out to the planning, and you plan these treatments. The very next step is to track and keep track of where they were done and what kind of treatments went on the ground. And then you want to ask, the next step beyond acres treated is what's the outcome? These quick, sort of immediate, what is the impact? Are we moving it in the right direction? That's the next step. And for that, progress on that point, we have Dr. Envy Eitzel. She is a staff scientist at UC Berkeley, and she has been the point person for the Science Advisory Panel on outlining these core metrics, what are we going to track through time, and also running this pilot outcome reporting. Envy?
Thanks, John. So it's been mentioned that the regional resource kits have this really rich set of data sets with hundreds of metrics, and we've now got the treatment tracker data as well. So the goal here now is to try to figure out how to take the resources that have been assembled by the task force and to try to move on to being able to report something about acres treated, which is of course what John just said. So this is a first pass, trying to show how these things go together, basically. The process that we've taken so far that John just alluded to at the core metrics is that we started with these 100+ metrics. The Science Advisory Panel evaluated all these different metrics for a variety of different purposes to try to get a sense of what would make them useful, not just for planning, but for reporting outcomes. And then we presented that to the task force. The task force then developed a core set of 20 that was definitely fewer than 100, and tried to, and then we did a workshop explaining the process that we went through and presenting that list itself. And then since then, we've been sharing with other different efforts from different teams and different efforts from different agencies around the state and some of the federal folks, trying to make sure that we're coming up with metrics that are going to be aligned or at least consistent, both the metrics themselves, also what we think is important about the metrics, and also what we might do with them. So the ones that you're going to see now that I'm showing you are just 3 examples that we're using to pilot the ideas we've been developing. So what we learned from the process so far is that the features of these kinds of metrics that would be useful for outcome reporting are that they need to have statewide coverage. There may be differences from region to region, but we do need to be able to cover the whole state. They are consistently calculated. They're responsive to the management actions that are reported, especially in the treatment tracker, since that's what we're trying to kind of weave together. They cover multiple aspects of the ecosystem, and then that they align with these other state and federal efforts, because again, we want these things to be consistent. So between the workshops and the meetings with these agencies and other teams, we have identified metrics that meet these criteria. And so our next step is to determine how to use them for reporting. So what we've done with our pilot is we started with the footprints, and I'm glad that we had the rubric of the activity versus footprint acres. We're taking the footprints of the treatment tracker, and also footprints from CAL FIRE showing where the wildfires have happened. And we're going to try to see what the outcomes of treatments are using the metrics that we have on hand in these regional resource kits. So in order to do that, what we're doing is using data sets or metrics from the Center for Ecosystem Climate Solutions. And I want to give a quick description of what those metrics are so you have a sense of what's underneath this. So the SEECS metrics are fundamentally based on vegetation change derived from remote sensing. So then what the system does is it takes the change in vegetation and translates it into changes in other potential ecosystem components. So for example, how would you take that change in vegetation and imagine what that does to potential fire behavior? If the vegetation on that particular spot burned, how tall would the flames be? And if there was less vegetation, how much shorter would the flame length be? Similar for something like water, if the vegetation is there, it's sucking up water like a bunch of straws, and if you remove some of the straws, then there's more water available. And so what kind of change does that represent? And then finally, also, how would carbon change based on that vegetation change? And then what we're doing is we're taking those footprints, the treatment footprints and the fire footprints, and just sort of using like a cookie cutter to stamp down over that change in those metrics and see essentially what the change is in those areas specifically. So a quick word about why we're talking about the fires as well as the treatments, and partly because we're increasing pace and scale, but we still find that the footprints of fires are going to be larger than treatments, and especially now. And that's going to continue to be true for a while, so it's important to sort of understand that particular aspect of things. And the other thing that's useful is because we've studied the way fires affect the landscape, we're familiar with what to expect from them in terms of the short-term effects on the landscape. And so it's a good way to check that the reporting that we're using, the methods that we're using, are giving realistic or reasonable results when we look at how they affect the treatments. Also, because they're such an important part of the change in the landscape, actually just seeing what the outcomes are from them is useful. So what we're going to do is show average changes for the treatment areas and for the wildfire areas to get a sense of how the treatments are changing the landscape relative to the effects of fire. And I'm going to start with the flame length variable. This is a representation of potential fire behavior. This is not an actual measurement of fire behavior. And the really cool thing is you're about to see, in the next talk, you're going to see the actual changes in measured fire behavior and impacts on firefighting. But here we're just looking at if that vegetation were to burn, this is what the flame length could be. And what we're seeing is an overall decrease of about a foot across the Sierra Nevada region. That does include the 2 bars on the right, so that decrease is partially being driven by what's happening in the fire footprints and the treatment footprints. But if you look at just the treatment footprints, you're seeing a decrease in potential flame length by about 2.5 feet, and the wildfires by about 8 feet. And initially that looks like fire is doing a lot more work to reduce potential future fire, but unfortunately many of those fires are burning at high severity. And what we're doing with these bars here on the bar plot is we're grouping all of the different kinds of severities of fire together, and we're also grouping all of the different kinds of treatments together. So there's a bit of a conflating of those different landscape impacts. But for the acres where there's high severity, the near-term reduction in fire risk is not necessarily good. It's potentially going to lead to higher elevated risk later or other things that we don't want. So even though the treatments are having a more modest effect, and also remember over a smaller area of the state, they're still getting us closer to what fire is doing while not leaving large parts of the landscape in a state we might not want. And I also want to notice that this particular set of metrics is only focused on the specific treatment plot itself and not the treatment shadow effects or sort of neighborhood effects. And of course, we know that doing treatment in a strategic location reduces fire behavior elsewhere. So this is a conservative estimate to look at it this way. And the really good thing is that we're seeing an impact even over 3 years. And in addition to that, many treatments are designed to have positive impacts over a much longer time period. So again, even with just 3 years, seeing something that you can measure is really useful because it's a conservative look at what's going on. It's probably more than this, what the way the impact is. So we've seen that fire reduces flame length a lot, treatments more modestly. We see a similar pattern for water availability. And again, the more vegetation you remove, the more water is available for future vegetation. And so again, the treatments are removing more than the average over the whole region, but then the fires, of course, are removing more. And then finally, we're looking at the change in live above ground carbon. So now we really see the drawback of letting wildfire remove all of the live biomass. Treatments are having a more moderate effect, but now that feels like maybe that's not a bad thing. So we do lose some carbon when we remove vegetation, but not to the degree that we do with wildfire. So the bottom line is that we wanted to pilot a method to go from acres treated to showing potential outcomes, and so here we have it. It's something we can work with. It's something that we can continue to shop around with other folks who are doing these kinds of efforts, and it's a step beyond where we were. So we're happy with having something to work with. And this method that we're developed shows that we are making an impact within the treated areas. And then we know also what we've learned from doing this, that's the other thing about this being a pilot, is that we've learned that we really absolutely need data sets that are consistently calculated before and after the treatments. So that's one thing that's really great about the SEEKS data set. And there's not a difference in the way it's calculated before and after. And then that the accurate and complete treatment data is really great. And the more complete we can get it, the better, because we're essentially not getting credit for the treatments that we don't have footprints for. And that would really help to be able to see how that's going. And our next steps are to do a workshop later this year showing details on the methods and results. Of course, this was just a very quick high-level summary. There's a lot more to say about it. We're going to continue to work with other state and federal teams who are working on similar efforts to do monitoring, status and trends, and outcome reporting, which John alluded to at the beginning. We're going to incorporate feedback from this approach. We'll refine and improve our analysis and continue to work with others who are doing similar things. And that the lessons learned from this pilot efforts will inform both the future regional resource kit development and will also hopefully be useful for the 2025 action plan update that Patrick mentioned. And that is what I have to share for you today.
Thanks, MV. So we've seen the treatments get planned, we've seen them implemented, and from this outcome reporting, we're seeing that we're moving the conditions in the right direction. But we still haven't answered the question, are they effective? Are they doing what they intended to do? So now we have, for the next step, we're going to have an example of how that works. We have Chief Frank Bigelow from CAL FIRE. He is the Deputy Director of Community Wildfire Preparation and Mitigation at CAL FIRE. Based on the innovation evident in this this fuel treatment effectiveness, we're going to have to give Chief Bigelow a new title. He really is an environmental data scientist. It's quite impressive.
All right, thanks for that introduction, John, and I wish I could take credit for having done this, but I have a fantastic team, as we do everywhere in the department. But what I'm here to talk to you about today is something that we are at CAL FIRE really excited about. It's called our Fuels Treatment Effectiveness Reporting. So we've heard a lot today about our targets and our goals that we need to have. We need to be able to measure our success and have a path forward. But what do we do beyond just having a number? And what do those acres mean? And were those acres that we treated on the ground effective when they were introduced to fire? And this process that we've developed and this system and the dashboard allows us to tell that story. And what we have done is developed, again, the fuels treatment effectiveness reporting to evaluate the impacts of vegetation management treatments that they have with respect to fire behavior, and highlight how fuels reduction activities not only assist in suppression efforts, but how they protect property and the natural resources of the state of California and people as well. What we're trying to evaluate is initially in this first phase are the positive impacts, and we're really diving into that. So what I mean by that is, did the fuel treatment have a positive impact on the fire? Was the right-of-way clearance wide enough that people were able to safely ingress and egress? Were firefighters able to access critical infrastructure because the fuel reduction project was in place? Did it slow the forward spread of the fire, allowing our aircraft to actually get retardant to the ground to slow it? Or was it now accessible to firefighters along a ridge top because we had done a shaded fuel break? Or was it actually used as a primary control line, meaning the fire burned up to it and the fuels reduction was such that it actually stopped the forward spread of the fire? These are, among many other things, the things we're looking at to evaluate, did we actually have the desired effect when placing that fuel project there? Or was it a prescribed fire? And did that prescribed fire lessen the amount of fuel available and again slow the forward spread of the fire? How it all works is it's an automated process. So as a fire gets determined, and a lot of us are familiar with the applications that you can use to look to see where fires are, and there's a pin initially placed on a map where that ignition has started. Well, we ingest that same data, and then we buffer that point by a quarter of a mile initially. And that quarter of a mile, we look to see if there are any fuels projects within that quarter mile. And immediately our automated system sends an email to the coordinator within that CAL FIRE unit, letting them know that they have a fuels treatment that is potentially impacted by a wildland fire. And we send them a survey that pulls CalMapper data, our database that we use to track all our fuels project that ultimately feeds into the interagency treatment tracker. We pull that data into the survey. We also pull all of our computer-aided dispatching or CAD dispatch information for that fire into the survey. And then we ask our representatives in that unit to fill out the short survey. And it's very user-friendly. And it allows them to just quickly answer some yes or no questions. Of course, if the answers are yes, you get some more questions to answer. And then fill out a brief narrative and include some pictures that help illustrate the point that you're trying to make and the effectiveness. Once that survey is complete, it gets routed through multiple iterations of checks to make sure that, you know, grammar and punctuation and all the things are correct. And ultimately, it ends up in our communications department, who puts it into a template format that's available on our website. And I'll show you where that is in just a minute. But all of this is happening, you know, automatically through our system that we developed to make this as easy as possible, so that we get the desired feedback that we want to be able to tell the story of the treatments. But, you know, why are we doing this? And this is a visual representation of what the dashboard looks like as of a couple of weeks ago. That number on the right of the fires that involve treatments has gone up to 18, and the positive impacts has gone up to 34. And you'll be able to now, and it's exciting for me to announce, as of 8 o'clock this morning, this this dashboard went live on our CAL FIRE website. It is not optimized right now for mobile devices, so I recommend either using a tablet or a desktop device today to view it. We are working on the next version of that. Will be optimized on our website for mobile applications. And I'll show you a QR code that'll take you directly to that in a moment. But again, getting back to the why are we doing this, it's really important for us as a department to evaluate the effectiveness of every aspect of our fuels project, so we can be very intentional about where we place those and how big they need to be, what type of activities we use to complete that, so that we're being the most effective in the placement, but also the use of money to do that. Because, you know, it's all of our money that we put into that comes back to CAL FIRE to be able to put these in, and we want to be respectful of that and make sure that everybody sees what we're doing, how we're doing it, where we're putting it, and is it being effective. As you go to the dashboard, what you'll see as you zoom into a specific project, all those green dots you saw on the map are the positive impacts. When you click on one of those, it will take you to that incident, and you'll see all the relevant incident information there on the left that tells you about the incident itself, the treatment details, which treatment objective it was, and then the effectiveness and the narrative that the person who did the evaluation put in there. But then also you'll have the pictures available to view. There's also some other data in there that we're really excited about as well. So we're evaluating by treatment objective, of which we have 4 that we kind of lump the categories into. Those are right-of-way clearance, broadcast burn, fuel break, and fuels reduction. And as you can see by the pie chart there on the left, fuels reduction by 52% is the most effective at this point manner of treatment. But you can also see on the right that we break it down by activities. And as you expand that window on the dashboard, all of those bars will have the title for them. As you see it in this picture, it kind of skips every other one. But as we can see that pile burning has been one of the most effective thus far. And keep in mind that we rolled this out to our CAL FIRE units in June, and it's only been employed for that period of time, from June to today. So although we have 18 fires and multiple other impacts, we're still in the infancy of evaluating this data, and these numbers and the effectiveness of some of these activities may fluctuate. But so this is just a snapshot in time. But what this allows for us to do is to determine exactly which activities are the most effective and that we can employ in other places across the state to make sure, again, that we're being the most effective and the most thoughtful in how we're conducting those activities. So you can access this dashboard on fire.ca.gov. And as you scroll down, as Chief Tyler mentioned, the interactivity of our new map that's on that website, where you can see all of our incidents in real time, our aircraft flying over those, get up to the minute information. we're right below that for fuels reduction. That's how important this is for us as a department. Click on that link and it will take you to the fuels reduction page. There's also a hyperlink there for the fuels effectiveness reports, or you can follow the QR code here and it will take you to that page as well. So I mentioned as you go to that fuels treatment effectiveness reports tab there at the bottom, we did do some templating for the reports. So if you're the type of person that likes to have a paper that you want to take in with you somewhere to show, or you were a part of that, it was a collaborative project and you want to be able to emphasize that as a part of your promotional material, those are available too in a PDF format for you to download to take with you as well. So it's not just on the dashboard, PDF versions in templated format so they all look the same are available. So now I'm going to go to a video that emphasizes this from the Park Fire. And we're
My name's Kevin Bohall. I'm one of the incident commanders on the Park incident.
Jason Finney, CAL FIRE Butte Unit, Battalion Chief for Battalion 2, which is Cohasset, Butte Meadows, and Forest Ranch.
These fuel breaks, the goal of fuel breaks isn't necessarily to be standalone, that they're just going to stop fire on their own. So this is a great example. It gives firefighters a foothold. And this one here specifically is a collaborative effort among multiple agencies, and these agencies participating is essentially what's protected the communities of Butte Meadows and Forest Ranch.
Having these fuel breaks, it slows that energy down. So we're not taking, we don't have 150-foot tall timber right against our control line. It just, we would not have held it in that area. Yeah, so SPI, they about 10 years ago, they started putting these shaded fuel breaks along the 32 corridor, kind of staying on the ridge. So it kind of comes off the highway in a lot of areas. But obviously you can see it builds us that buffer between the untreated areas and our control line. When we walk later, you'll see it's much easier to push dozers through this area instead of trying to push dozers and create a fuel break through that heavy timber. And we were very successful in slowing the fire's progression here and ultimately stopping it before it even got to 32, which kept it out of the Little Chico Creek drainage, the communities of Forest Ranch and Butte Meadows. So these fuel breaks that pretty much start on the north end of Forest Ranch and run all the way up through Butte Meadows were instrumental in us keeping the fire where we did and the footprint we have it in.
Landscape style fuel breaks. Sierra Pacific Industries is a great cooperator and is probably one of the best in California when it comes to managing their lands. Making it a sustainable, renewable product, something that you're going to have timber for future generations, but making sure that we're doing fuel breaks not just across federal or state agencies, but across private lands to make sure that all of these, it's like the Good Neighbor Authority. Ideas where we're doing large-scale fuel breaks that not only protect communities, but are also going to be at the best value for wildlife, resource benefit, all those other things that we've been talking about going on today. So it's actually a collaborative effort, getting people involved and getting people to participate and manage the lands that we have, not just across California, but across the United States.
My name is Mike Maloney. I'm a Butte County resident, a full-time resident of Butte Meadows for the last 5 years. I think the Park Fire this round really caused people to look at things differently. I think people are starting to realize, number one, the importance of following directions to evacuate when it's time, because those decisions are not taken lightly by CAL FIRE and the Sheriff's Department. But two, people are realizing the importance of clearing defensible space around their homes and the value of our community partners with CAL FIRE, Sierra Pacific, and whoever else, the Fire Safety Council, whoever that does these fuel reduction projects up our way.
Okay, well, in summary here, you're going to see a lot more of this from the department, really telling the story about the effectiveness of fuels projects, but also being transparent about when they worked and when they didn't. So as a part of this, we do actually have the evaluator say no if it didn't. But keep in mind there are many different reasons why that might not have been effective. There are atypical weather patterns that could have overrun it, but we can still learn from that. We can learn that maybe we should have made that a little bit wider, or maybe we should have put it a little bit over here. And that's the whole point of this, is taking a real strong look and evaluating each one of those projects to determine its effectiveness But we're really excited for this, and please take a look at it and dive into the data and provide us any feedback too. We want to hear from you, so thank you.
Great. Thank you. Let's give a round of applause to all our panelists.
All right, thank you so much. I'm going to ask our panelists to step off the stage, and we'll bring on the other panels as I just share a couple of thoughts. We're going to spend the last half hour before lunch hearing what's happening in the basin from key leaders here, both on the Nevada and California side. And as they come up, I just want to share, this is a really big step forward, Patrick, I think, and I imagine that our task force leaders would agree. You know, to me, this tracking our overall projects, whether it's activities or footprint acres, was a big missing piece of our work. You know, our state and federal leaders secured an unprecedented amount of investment to get this work done. That funding translated through several state, federal, local agencies into projects. We've got a lot of project partners here today that got this work done, but we never really were able to get our arms around just the breadth of all of this work. Much less determine how effective it's being. So now, thanks to this treatment tracker, we have a publicly transparent dashboard, shows how much work is happening, where it's happening. And Chief Tyler, I have to commend you and Chief Bigelow. I mean, this effectiveness tracker that CAL FIRE is putting together is great. And it's remarkable that it's really driven by the leaders across your units. It's going to tell us a lot. It's going to tell you a lot about what's effective. And to Patrick's point, as we move into next year's update of the action plan and the scientific advisory panel, it's going to help us understand where is the best bang for the buck in terms of this money that we're spending. I think I speak for everyone when I say that wildfire resilience will never be a mission accomplished type of activity. It's going to continue ongoing land management, ongoing landscape stewardship. And these tools that were previewed today, this 1.0 version, is the first step towards continually tracking our progress and then adaptively managing the work that we do. So I can't say enough about all the work that went into this.